Brands are 5 times more likely to grow if their categories are growing.
The consumer means everything.
Growing the pie, it's just not about taking share. It's about expanding value for everyone.
Some big brands start to kind of, pay more attention to maybe the marketplace or the channel or the competition.
Well, what we find is even more powerful is to observe consumer behavior.
What grounds people at Nike is reminding ourselves that the consumer is who we're in service to.
I want to welcome everyone to this edition of Grow the Pie. In this series, we explore how brands shouldn't just take market share, but also fundamentally grow the market itself, which creates more value for everyone. And today, I am thrilled to welcome Eric Sprunk, a friend and colleague from our time together on the Nordstrom board. Eric is the former Chief Operating Officer of Nike, where he worked for 27 years. At Nike, Eric played a pivotal role in shaping its global strategy and athletic partnerships. Eric continues to lend his expertise across several Fortune 500 boards, including REI, Universal Music Group, and General Mills. Eric also has an honorary doctorate of business from the University of Montana. Eric, it's so great to have you here. And I have to say that rapid fire round gave us a pretty good preview of our philosophies and how we think. And I'm really looking forward to see where the conversation goes today.
Thanks, Guy. That's quite an introduction. I appreciate that. You even dropped the honorary doctorate in there. I'm super excited to be here. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about a variety of topics, and this is a great one. So thanks for the invite, and I'm super honored to be asked to participate.
Fantastic. And I'd love to start with your experience at Nike. Nike is widely considered to be one of the most successful sports brands in the world. I would attest to that in my experience. And I'd love to hear from you and learn from you. What role does the consumer play in bringing the brand to life? And where do you see brands falling short in your experience?
Yeah, wow, that's a pretty loaded, multi-dimensional question there. The short, simple answer is the consumer means everything, right? We talked about that in the speed round. And at Nike, Nike's a huge company. It's gone through a ton of growth. The brand ebbs and flows a little bit. A lot of times we're the category leader, we're the market leader. Some big brands, Nike guilty as well, start to kind of pay more attention to maybe the marketplace or the channel or the competition or macro trends, et cetera. And what grounds people at Nike is reminding ourselves that the consumer is who we're in service to, and it's the consumer who buys our product. And not unlike you all, in many cases, there's somebody in between the brand and the consumer. It's a store, right? It's a Foot Locker, as an example. It's a Dick's Sporting Goods. It could be that wholesale partner. And sometimes people forget that really what's the most important thing to the brand is the people shopping in those places. We want to talk to that consumer, irrespective of where they shop, where they decide to shop for their Nike product. We want to be agnostic. Would we like them to shop on Nike.com? Would we like them to shop in the Nike stores? Yes. But most importantly, we want a relationship with the consumer. And the consumer isn't just the Olympic athlete. The consumer is people who just want to live a healthier lifestyle. They just want to, we want to inspire them to be active, and we want them, of course, to buy our product. So the long answer is multi-dimensions of the consumer. The short answer is, the consumer is the most important thing for the brand.
I love it. It's interesting because when you were sharing that, I had always thought that a brand like Nike starts from a brand point of view and then gets to the consumer. And at P&G, we start with the consumer and then build our brand around it. But it's amazing to see how similar our approaches are, which is we both start with in your case, the customer you call, and then we call consumer, but we both start with that human being and then design around them. We talk a lot about providing a superior experience across 5 touch points for our consumers and making sure that we show up consistently. And I've heard you say, and you just shared it again, which is every every aspect of the brand experience for Nike is an opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of our offering. So it's actually so much more consistent than I initially had in my head. So that's great.
Yeah, because I mean, you always have somebody in between you and the consumer, right? Not always, but a lot of times you have somebody in between your brands and the consumer.
We talk a lot about solving unmet needs of our consumers, and we try to do that. We try to do that consistently as a way to grow the market, and it also then really helps inform where we want to be superior.
But let's talk about the difference and the responsibility of growing market share and growing the marketplace. Because you and I have talked, when you're the leader, you're the sector leader, you're the industry leader, you're the category leader, your responsibility is to do both. You don't get to take off making the pie bigger and just focus on having a bigger piece of it. You've got to, what builds sustainable brands are brands that build both. How do you think about your company? How do you think about it?
So we're so right with you. And you said it, which is, so what we've learned, and actually there was a Kantar study on this. There was a world panel, 29,000 brands across 52 countries. And they found that brands are 5 times more likely to grow if their categories are growing, which is exactly what you're sharing. And especially when you're in the number 1 or number 2 position, we believe you bear that responsibility. And another aspect of that is back to our consumer, which is if you're, I'll use this for me an example that I had once heard that really resonates, which is if there's a tin cup market and those tin cups don't have handles, and one of the consumer unmet needs is their hands get hot, too hot or too cold when they hold the cup and try to drink. If you simply provide another cup without a handle at a different price, with a different color, or maybe different features, it's very difficult to create value longer term. If you launch a cup with a handle, suddenly, whether you bring in incremental users, whether you are able to, whether consumers are willing to see more value and pay more for it, whether you open up a new market segment, you create long-term value for retailer partners, for the industry, and most importantly, you give consumers something that they can't currently access in the market. And you're solving an unmet need. So for us, that's so important, and it actually requires a much deeper, you said it about what's the insight behind the insight, a much deeper understanding and observing consumers versus just hearing from consumers, because sometimes you gave the example, consumers, it's difficult to articulate what's missing or what they want. And sometimes what we find is even more powerful is to observe consumer behavior and watch what we call compensating behavior. So in the example of the tin cup, you might see a consumer, before they hold the cup, put a towel around the cup. That would be an example of a compensating behavior. Or, we just recently launched a brand called Zevo, which is attracting flying insects in the home. A compensating behavior for consumers is they wouldn't open their screens because they didn't want bugs to come in. So solving and looking at the observational learnings from consumers really tells us a lot. So right with you on growing the category. And one thing, it's market share is so important. So this isn't about not growing market share. It's just doing it in a way that creates value.
That's right. I want every consumer product company to be competitive. So let me combine a couple of these topics. So when you're going out and trying to imagine what those consumer needs are your retail partners helpful in that? Do you discern input from the customer as well as the consumer? How does that process work? Because you guys are making so many different types of products in so many different marketplaces around the world.
What's incredible is our retail partners have been in these industries for decades, and they have so much knowledge. And oftentimes there will be someone in our retailer group, whether it's our buyer or chief merchant or someone else who has a depth of experience and expertise that actually provides what I would consider to be transformational input on the innovation. How we design it, the packaging, product choices, so influential. And in fact, when we partner early, when we can still impact decisions, we always come out in such a better place. And that's on our core categories where we as a company have decades of expertise as well. We have a tremendous benefit in that. Now, when we're actually expanding into new categories, which is an area that my division is focusing on, it's even more critical because oftentimes we will have a merchant in one of our retail partners who has 20 years experience up against someone who has 1 or 2 years experience providing incredible insight. And that has already helped. One example I wanted to give you when you're asking that question, it immediately came to me is Spruce, which is a brand we just launched in a category that we have not been in before, which is lawn and garden. So it's a product that kills weeds and grass for consumers, but in a non-toxic, safe way with easier to use delivery systems. So more convenient. And what we found is that one of the unmet needs of consumers, particularly dog parents and younger families and our female consumers, was they were considering the category products to be pretty bulky. Some of them were concerned about safety, not so easy to use. And so those consumers were on the sidelines. Or they would have a product in their garage that they would only pull out when they had to. And complementing our consumer input with our retailer input allowed us to bring Spruce to market in a way where 30% of Spruce consumers are new to the category. So talking about growing the category, they basically, were really on the sidelines, but they have weeds. So I love that question, and it's a tremendous benefit to the propositions, both in categories that we've been in for a while and as well as new categories. Everybody talks about influencers these days. And I believe you were one of the first you didn't call them influencers, but truly to partner, in your case, with athletes who, in a way, provided an exceptional level of influencing to us as consumers. And I'd love your perspective on, how do you view athletes, influencers? How did that innovation start? And I know you have a lot of personal expertise in that area, so please let us know.
It's a good question. It's a super fun part of the job, and when you work in sports, let's just say until the last, I don't know, couple decades, maybe just the last decade, the athlete was the influencer, and that was the whole model: signing and paying athletes to wear Nike product. And it was, it wasn't the first time people had spent money to get their products out in the marketplace. But the competitive set for a long time, the folks at Adidas were doing a great job. But Adidas was signing like leagues and Olympic federations and sometimes teams. This is the early days of Nike, right? It's only 50 some years old, so the first 20, 30 years. And, the company started with a runner at the University of Oregon named Steve Prefontaine back in the days of AAU running, right? And Phil effectively paid him to wear Nike running shoes in the AAU and then the Olympic trials. He was fined, couldn't pay athletes money, right? They were amateur, hence the AAU. And that beget this kind of philosophy by Phil, which ends up, it ends up with John McEnroe, the very first professional athlete ever signed by Nike, Ilie Nastase, the tennis player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, hardly anybody knows that. But then it's Jordan, it's LeBron, it's Ronaldo. It's it becomes a little bit of the way the marketing machine works, and they were the influencers. Now, more complicated, right? There's Drake. Drake is a Nike athlete, right? So athlete, the definition of athlete has expanded, right? The brand has evolved from just do it means like compete at your very best, win. Now just do it is just get off the couch, just try, like. Go out and be healthy. It's more expansive. You got to grow categories, right? You got to make athletic footwear and apparel more wearable for every day. So you're not just going to the gym in it. You're not just competing in a 5K when you're wearing a running shoe. You wear it every day. You wear it all day. You wear it wherever you're going. That's why this topic, when you and I talk about it, is so important, because that's what's built athleisure, and that's what's built brands like Nike. Drake doesn't play in the NBA. Super important to people who love the NBA. Super important to athletes who love music. And so trying to find the right balance can be difficult. For a long time at Nike, we had lots of influencers, musicians, artists, wearing Nike product. We never paid one. It was kind of a principle. We're not going to pay non-athletes to wear our product. Now, that's all changed. In the last 10 years, like that's just all changed. Influencers are really, really important, not more important than the consumer who actually wears our product to make themselves better or for a living.
So I'd love to ask you, if you could give a piece of advice, one piece of advice to your younger self before you started all of this, what would that piece of advice be?
I tell my own kids and young people all the time, the aperture for opportunity is never going to be as wide open as it is as when you start your career. So make decisions that allow you to have more and more opportunity. If you get a chance to live overseas, try to find a way to say yes. If you get a chance to switch divisions and you're not sure, try to find a way to say yes, right? It was one of the questions in the speed round, right? If you're
not uncomfortable, you're not growing.
You're not growing, right? Because the aperture starts to close. I found a way to say yes to living overseas. That I say that all the time. It was an amazing experience. My last finance job, I have an accounting degree. My last finance job was in 1998 when I was the CFO of Nike Europe. That's the last finance job I've had. So that I think I tried to follow that, but I think that's really good advice. Always be learning. We've talked a lot about this. So you don't have the benefit of age like I do, Guy.
I've got some of it.
What would you, amazing, successful career, right? Unbelievable job right now. What would you tell yourself? How would you answer that question?
If I went back, I think the number one thing is the advice you gave, Eric, which is this knower to learner. Because I do think I've learned over time the value of the value of being a learning leader. And when I've ever in my career been, I would say, less certainty or more insecure about something, about a capability I had, or going into a new country and not knowing aspects of the culture or the business or the supply chain, whenever I was, I'd say, uncomfortable or less confident, I would try to overcompensate sometimes for it with showing up as a knower. And I think probably that's the one area, if I could go back, I'd probably tell myself, you know what, it's okay. Everybody goes through it. Be curious, ask questions. And you know what, not only will it not get in your way, but it might even strengthen your partnerships with others, and it might even accelerate.
Right? That's super good advice.
Eric, it has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. You've been part of shaping one of the most influential brands in the world. I think your experience, it speaks to the idea of growing the pie for everyone, from where we started. I always learn so much from you. And this conversation shows that growing the pie, it's just not about taking share. It's about expanding value for everyone. It's from consumers, teams, communities, future leaders. Eric, thank you for sharing your insights, not just on Grow the Pie, but also on leadership, on learning, on always staying humble. And I'm walking away from this with a few notes for myself and to take away, and I hope others will too. Really appreciate your candor, Eric. Thank you.
Thanks, God.